Hi, I am Emma Gruel, and I am working as the company manager and audience development assistant for the Nebraska Repertory Theatre this summer. Nebraska Repertory Theatre has a season for 2013 that includes Jane Austen's Emma, adapted by John Jory, Mrs. Mannerly by Jeffrey Hatcher, and Making God Laugh by Sean Grennan. So today we are going to be talking a little bit about Emma, specifically Jane Austen's novel, and we're going to be talking with a few friends here. We have Hannah Coatney, Jordan Brooks, and Kristen Kramer here to talk about the book and give you a little Emma book club today. So let's start with Hannah, and why don't you guys just introduce yourselves and let our audience members get to know you a little.
All right. My name is Hannah Coatney. I'm 19 years old, and I'm a communications major, film studies minor at UNL. In terms of what I'm doing right now, I've been doing a lot of reading and watching films, but other than that, just getting ready for the school year.
Excellent.
I'm Jordan Brooks, and I'm also 19, and I'm a double major in psychology and film studies at UNL, and right now I'm just working and reading and watching movies, basically. So yeah.
Okay, I'm Kristen Kramer. I am 19 years old. I am going to major in biology and sociology this year at UNL. I'm minoring in religious studies, and this summer I've just been, hanging out, working, doing whatever. So yeah.
Great. Well, yeah, we're so happy to have all of you here. Thank you so much for joining us. So let's get into Emma and talking about the book. So let's just start out. Why don't one of you start it? What were your initial thoughts about the book, or thoughts right after you finished it?
Okay, I'll start. I've had a hard time reading more classic literature, so that was one of the reasons why I was excited to do this, because it would really force me to. But it was about as hard of a read as I imagined, just because it's a higher level of language. And I thought it was really interesting because there isn't really a lot that happens in the book. It's really just like a bunch of gossip and daily drama. But there were parts where you really find yourself getting sucked into what's happening, and I thought that was really interesting.
Would you say specifically that you were getting sucked into the matchmaking schemes and those kind of things that Emma plays with a lot?
Yeah, I guess a little bit. Like, once you get past the first few chapters of introduction and backstory, once you get into the dialogue between one another, and just Emma's thought process is just really interesting, and to kind of get her point of view on everything. So yeah, I definitely think that's what it was.
I totally agree, with the everyday occurrences of back in the day. I thought it was interesting. It wasn't a daring adventure and all this stuff happening, but it was you got to go inside of her head, and you got to see how she perceived everybody else, and how she perceived herself, and how she never realized that she had these flaws that she had, but she came to realize them. And I just really liked seeing that happen, because I don't know, it was very human, I guess. Yeah, I really liked reading it. I mean, it was kind of a long read, but I enjoyed it a lot.
Yeah, it is Jane Austen's longest novel, I believe. Now, what other Jane Austen novels have you guys read?
None. This is my first one.
I read Pride and Prejudice, and I began Sense and Sensibility, but I never finished it quite.
This is my first one, but I have seen the movies, so that's a start.
Me too.
Well, let's talk about the characters specifically. I know we've started talking about Emma a little bit. So, what do you think of the character Emma? She's a little bit of a handful, but did you find yourself, sympathizing with her or seeing where she was coming from?
I read this quote by Jane Austen, how she was like, I'm the only person who would like Emma because, I don't know, I think she really, like, connected with her, and she just kind of wrote her really real. And I liked Emma a lot because, like, it's very real. Like, you don't really see your own faults and how things that you're doing can, like, hurt other people, but when you mostly just think of yourself. So I really liked her.
Good. And
Yeah.
what did you think, Hannah?
I guess when I started reading it and you see the way she manipulates Harriet, I just really didn't like her because you're just, oh, she's so manipulative and she's so worried about social status and all of these other things. But you realize that, in a sense, we're all kind of worried about those same things. Obviously, in a different setting because that was, 1800s, and we're in the 21st century. But I guess what Jordan's mentioned a lot is kind of the human quality. And so I guess after reflecting a little bit, I grew to like her, but there was kind of, I guess it was that human quality, ironically, that made me not like her at first, if that makes sense. The fact that she wasn't so perfect.
Mm-hmm.
So.
I think that makes a lot of sense. Yeah. Let's talk about some other characters. What other characters did you guys find most interesting or most surprising with things that they did?
Well, I liked Harriet.
I thought.
Okay.
You go.
Okay,
Go.
I liked Harriet a lot because she was just very aloof. She was like, she had no idea what was going on, and even though, like, Emma was using her a lot, kind of, and just manipulating her, she, like, never thought badly of her, and I just thought she was sweet. Okay, go, Kristen.
Oh,
I
thought Jane's character was interesting because, like, I don't know, at the beginning it was like Emma, like, didn't like her at all and, like, just talked kind of bad about her a lot, and she was, like, really, like, aloof and, like, reserved, and, like, you didn't really like her at the beginning, I feel like. I don't know if you guys liked her at the beginning, but it was just kind of like, oh, plain Jane, And then at the end, like, you really see her character a lot more, and she turns into, like, I don't know, this person that you can really like and relate to, and she's cool, I thought.
Yeah, absolutely. What about, let's talk about Mr. and Mrs. Elton a little bit. What did you guys think of them?
It's just weird how, like, your opinion on the characters, especially, like, Mr. Elton, but, like, a lot of the characters, your opinion, like, changes so much over the course of the book. Like, Mr. Elton, at first, you're like, oh, like, he's, like, cool, like, yeah. And then, like, later, he just marries Mrs. Elton and is just a big piece. He's a piece of work,
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And Mrs. Elton is quite the character herself, too, insulting Harriet and such. What about, so we've talked a little bit about Jane, so let's talk about her engagement to Frank Churchill. What did you guys think about that when reading?
I didn't expect that at all, actually. Like, I felt like it came out of nowhere. Because they said that they were very much in love, and like I just didn't expect that at all. Like, that's such a weird thing to be engaged to someone. Like, it's a different time, and to keep it a secret like that, and like have nobody know about it, and nobody know that you guys love each other. I don't know. It's just very weird. They'd be like, oh, they're engaged now. Oh, okay. Where'd that come from?
Yeah, I know that I didn't expect it either, but I knew that it just didn't seem like there was going to be anything really between Emma and Frank Churchill. just because I expected, like, I felt like
Yeah.
in the end it was going to be Mr. Knightley and Emma anyway. But yeah, the whole thing that it ended up being Frank and Jane was like completely out of left field. And then I also thought it was interesting how angry Jane got when Frank was trying to really cover up their engagement. Like, I don't know. I can understand where she's coming from, but at the same time, you want this engagement to be secret, and he's just trying to do whatever he can to protect your relationship. So
That's true. Hannah, you brought up Mr. Knightley and that you thought that he and Emma were going to be together from close to the beginning. What led you to believe that from the very beginning? What made them a good match?
I don't know. I haven't, obviously, as I mentioned, I haven't read any other Jane Austen books, but in the movies that I've seen, like Pride and Prejudice and Sense and Sensibility, there's always that one person throughout the movie that's just kind of like the good guy, and the main character, the main female character, tends to, you know, have wavering feelings about them throughout it, but in the very end they realize, like, they're actually, you know, I love them, or, you know, whatnot. And I guess, because I was trying to figure that out too, just something I was like, that's it. That is the end relationship. But I think it's the fact that Mr. Knightley is her brother-in-law, correct?
Correct.
Yeah. And in all reality, he really has no reason to be hanging around as much as he does, considering Isabella and John Knightley aren't even there. So I think that's kind of one thing, and yeah, I think that's about it. I think maybe just, yeah, that was all I could think of.
Well, I saw the movie Clueless, so I kind of knew they were going to get together when I figured it out. But as I went along with the book, though, if I had no prior knowledge, I wouldn't have expected it, like, right away, but definitely the way that they interacted with each other, it was pretty obvious that, especially when Emma was talking about her attraction to Frank Churchill and how she was like, I'm only a little bit in love with him, it was pretty obvious that only the highest amount of man would please her and would, like, be good for her. So I kind of could see why you would predict them together, because he was obviously the best choice for her.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That is fun. Let's see, what other characters or plot points did you guys find particularly interesting or surprising? Let's see. Here, I'll bring up a character.
Okay.
Well, let's talk about how Emma treats Miss Bates and Jane Fairfax. We touched a little bit on Jane Fairfax, but we haven't talked about Miss Bates yet, and the kind of side of Emma that's brought out around her.
Mm-hmm. Well, that part, it was like her flaws coming out, but that part made me really not like her, the way she was treating them. It was kind of like a catty girl type thing. Like, it's very interesting when reading, like, Jane Austen book or, like, that time frame. It's like, it kind of seemed like in regular conversation they would, like, diss each other, like, but it'd be, like, politely. And I just, it was like, that made me uncomfortable. Like, how did they just sit there and take that, like, without calling them out? It was just very weird. But I was like, what are you doing, Emma? That's rude.
Yeah, definitely. Let's talk about Mr. Woodhouse a little bit, and his hypochondria. What did you guys think of that?
I just thought it was funny that, like, every what she kept describing him as like not being able to understand that other people don't feel exactly the same way as he does, which I thought was really funny. And like, I guess a lot of people can be like that sometimes, but just like, even like, oh, gruel is good for you and I like gruel, so you should also eat a lot of gruel. Like, just stuff like that. That's funny.
Yeah.
He's interesting.
He's a fun character. Did you guys have a favorite character, or I don't know, I shudder to pick just one, but a character that you were a little more favorable towards?
I really liked Mr. Woodhouse because he was just funny. He reminded me of like my grandpa, who is like kind of grumpy, but like you love him anyway. And I also liked Mr. Knightley because he was so gallant and nice all the time. I really liked him. I don't know, it was like the rest of the characters, I really liked them all because they had their own like quirks and stuff, and they were all pretty interesting, but none of them I really had like this one favorite. They all pretty much entertained me the same amount.
I think I really liked Harriet just because of everything she goes through, and as Jordan and Krista mentioned earlier, like how oblivious she is to everything. But you just feel so sorry for her throughout the entire book because she turns down Mr. Martin and falls in love with Mr. Elton, and then it's like, nope, that's not happening. And then is in love with Mr. Knightley, that's not happening either. And she doesn't know who her parents are, so she has no idea where she sits in society. And then it was even kind of bittersweet when she does figure out who her parents are, and then it's like, oh, her and Emma can't have the same relationship now that she knows her parentage. So I think that whole like web of stuff that comes with Harriet is really interesting. And then Mr. Knightley just being the perfect male character, you can't help but love him all the way through.
True.
Yeah.
That's all I really had to say.
That's okay. So for those of you who have read Pride and Prejudice, what do you think about do you find any comparisons in the relationship between Emma and Mr. Knightley and Elizabeth and Mr. Darcy at all?
Well, Emma and Mr. Knightley are definitely more playful in their arguments, while Darcy and Elizabeth are more like hateful, which was like a hateful passion. That was nice though, but they were more like, I liked their relationship because it was like they always were very fond of each other and like in that way, but it was never, they were just very good friends, and then it turned into, oh, I really love you, like it's this thing. And I don't know, they're pretty similar but pretty different.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting point that you bring up, Jordan. I really liked how Emma and Mr. Knightley were very playful, but they weren't afraid to call each other on their faults and their mistakes. But it was all in like good-spirited. It was all well-spirited to try and fix those faults or mend them, I think.
Yeah, I liked whenever they did point out the fault, it was like the person who was at fault always felt like guilty for it. Like it was for their best. It was for the best, really. And it wasn't like just pointing out you're being a bad person. You know? It was for the better.
Huh, definitely. So what else? What do you guys want to talk about? Anything else that struck you?
Maybe like how I just thought it was weird how, okay, like Harriet is like her best friend, and then like just because Harriet like marries this guy, you know, at the end she marries this guy, and now she's like in a lower place in society, and it's like now we have to be like not close friends. It's like it's weird that that was so important at the time, or like so important to Emma. Like she's your friend, just be friends with her still.
Yeah, that is weird, those period discrepancies. Mm-hmm. Did you notice any other well, I mean, obviously, because there's so many engagements, and there's a lot different things about our customs with engagements now versus then. Was there anything that shocked you in regards to that, with how different things are now?
I thought it was interesting how it was like they're in a very small, it felt like a small town, and how the engagements were like the main gossip for like a week, and then it's just like that's all that they talked about for this whole time, and it was like everybody and up in everybody's business, but it was normal, and it was like they gossiped about each other, but it wasn't like being nosy. It was like normal in this like small town, I guess. And it was interesting how in this like small community how social rank was like a thing. Like you'd imagine if with so little people around that it wouldn't matter that much, but Emma was like above at the top, I guess. And then everybody else had their own little parts, and I just thought that was very weird how even then it was a thing, like the social chair and stuff.
I feel like the like social ranks and stuff were really constricting because it's like you can only be friends with these people because these people are like your society and like these people are below you, and it's like I don't know, yeah, I just thought it was really weird that they all like abided by that because it just like constricts your life and who you can be friends with and stuff, and that would be annoying.
It would be.
I feel like social status aside, the way that they do interact, though, is very relevant now in terms of small towns. Like, we live in Lincoln, we don't know every single person, but in smaller places such as even Beatrice, Nebraska, like, everyone knows each other, and I have family who live down there, and a couple years ago, you know, we're at Thanksgiving, and they're talking about, you know, the big news is that the Burger King got burnt down, and they're putting a new roof on it. And that's what they talk about. And so, yeah, it's kind of really weird that that's, you know, that used to be the norm. But at the same time, I think that's still something that's very relevant in certain parts. Probably not just in, like, small town United States, but other places around the world where, yeah, I don't know.
No, that makes a lot of sense. I get what you're saying. How many of you guys have seen Clueless? I know, Jordan, you mentioned you saw it. Have you seen it, Kristen and Hannah?
Favorite childhood movie?
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah. I've seen that quite a few times.
I watched it recently. I love that movie. It's so good.
It's so good.
That's excellent.
I've just seen like parts of it. I haven't seen a lot of it since I was really young, but I know she ends up with her like stepbrother or whatever, so I was like, oh, I guess she's gonna end up with Mr. Knightley. They're like brother and sister. Okay.
Yeah. Did you guys think that Clueless was a good adaptation of Emma after reading the book?
I didn't know Clueless was an adaptation of Emma until you just said it 3 seconds ago.
Oh, really?
So there we go.
Well, how about that? What do you think, Jordan? Did you think it was a good adaptation?
I think well, it was made in the 90s. I think it was a pretty, like, it strayed from the story, but then again, like, the story was based on, like, the gossip of the life in this, like, small town type thing. So I think to put it into, like, California in the 90s, I think that it did a really good job of showing, like, the social aspects and how, and, like, the character Emma herself, like, or Cher was her name, I think, in the movie, in Clueless. Yeah. I think showing her, from her perspective in the movie, it really connected to Emma, like, really well. I really think the character Emma connected well, and I think they did a really good job of that part. I really liked that.
That's awesome. Well, yeah, we're actually, as Nebraska Repertory Theatre, we're hosting a screening of Clueless this Sunday at the Ross, Sunday, July 14th. And it's free admission, and it's at 7 p.m., so, yeah, everyone should come check it out.
I have to do that.
So, any last thoughts about Emma or Clueless or any other Jane Austen related topics?
There were so many freaking names to keep up with.
I know.
Like the first few chapters when it like dove right in, I was like, I had to stop so many times. And when I first started the book, I was like, I don't know if I'm going to be able to do this because this is just like backstory, 20 million different names. And then even as it got towards the end, I was still having to like second guess myself because they would be like throwing in names that you hadn't heard for like 100 pages. So that was really interesting, but luckily the book kind of picked up after that.
Well, especially with names like Mr. Weston and Mr. Woodhouse and John Knightley versus George Knightley, you know.
And
Yeah.
both of them
Mr.
being called
Knightley.
Mr. Knightley.
Mhm.
And I think there's some times where they refer to themselves in the third person.
Yeah.
So that was super confusing. And with the way Jane Austen wrote, it wasn't like there'd be dialogue and it said Mr. Knightley, dialogue said Emma. Mr. Knightley replied with, it's just, it doesn't really show who's saying what. So then you get that random third person insert, and it's like you have to go back a page and a half to figure out what is, like, is that the third person? Is that, like, Mr. Elton talking? I don't know.
Yeah. The joys of Jane Austen, Matt. Well, good. Well, thank you all so much for being here and for talking about Emma and giving us your thoughts on that. Again, Emma opens at the Nebraska Repertory Theatre this Thursday, and it runs through August 11th is when our season ends. So we hope that you will all be able to come out and make it, as well as to our Clueless screening this Sunday at 7 p.m. at the Ross Film Theater. So thank you so much, Hannah and Jordan and Kristen.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Bye.